hope for today is that when in hearing from us and in discussing with one another, you'll catch a little bit of a vision and an idea for how you can develop a team. This is too big of a job, regardless of the size of your organization, for any one person to handle. And involving others, volunteers, or professional staff in the fundraising task and working collaboratively and strategically together, we can get a lot further than we can on our own. So I hope you'll come away with a few ideas for that and a vision for how you can do that better. And the other advantage to building a team is that we want our teams to be consistent and to outlast us. And that's really only possible through a team. If you're the only one doing fundraising, a lot of times if you transition away, that means all the funding transitions away as well. And so the fundraising as a team can really help with the longevity of your mission and of the work that God has called you to. Just a few words about myself. My name is Joel. I have been involved in professional fundraising for about a decade now. I graduated college in 2004 and spent the first 5 or 6 years after college in social work, first in downtown Chicago, working with children from really rough backgrounds, poverty, violence, drugs, alcohol, things like that. Then I actually was over in Germany for a couple of years working with adults with intellectual disabilities, went back to the States and got into higher education fundraising. So I was raising money for a small university in the Chicago area for about 6 years. And now I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I work at a place called Jill's House. And we primarily, we serve families who are raising children with profound intellectual disabilities. We do that primarily through overnight respite care. So families send their children to us for 24 to 48 hour stays several times throughout the year. The kids get a wonderful experience, and the parents get a break, which for the parents we serve is the only break they get. We have holistic family services built around that, and about 90% of the families we serve are outside the church. So this is an unreached people group, and so we do a lot of evangelistic outreach as well. We have about a $6 million budget and a fundraising team of 8 full-time people, so I feel tremendously blessed. But like I said at the get-go, regardless of how big or small your fundraising operation is, it's always hard. And doing it as a team is just going to help us get a lot further than we would otherwise. So without further ado, just want to go through a few points here. The elements of an effective fundraising team. Who here is the head of their organization? Okay. My guess would be if we looked at your job descriptions, if there is a written job description somewhere, very few of those job descriptions would say chief fundraiser. I've got some bad news for you. If you're the head of your organization, regardless of whether fundraising is in your job description or not, it is your responsibility. And fundraising will thrive at your organization insofar as you are actively involved in it and gladly involved in it. And as you put effort into it, you'll see your whole organization get better at fundraising through your involvement. So if you aren't the head of your organization and you're here, you don't have to tell on your organization right now if you're the head of your organization that isn't involved or isn't willing to get involved. But one thing that I would ask you to consider is as you work with your organization, as you go about your work, that you work with the head of your organization to try to convince him or her to get more involved in fundraising. One of the keys to effective fundraising is having the very top levels of your organization involved in the task. And so I really encourage you to work on that. One thing that we like to say is that advancement or fundraising is not a department. It's not one person's job, it's everybody's job. And the way everyone interacts with people outside the organization affects fundraising results. So even if you're not directly involved in fundraising, you can have an impact on fundraising. And your colleagues in your organizations, if they're not involved in fundraising, they still have an impact on it. So everyone is an advancement. We'll talk about a few ways to build a culture of generosity at your organizations and try to give you a few tips there. But the important points are advancement is everybody's job, and that includes the head of the organization. So I think I heard from a few folks, maybe 5-10% a day, a month of your time is spent fundraising. I know you're busy, and I know you have a lot of important work to do. One thing I would want to encourage you to do is to figure out ways that you could devote more of your time to that fundraising task. That's not time spent ministering to the people God has called you to minister to, but it will move your ministry forward in profound ways if you can find ways to do that. And building a team that can help free up some of your time to do those kinds of things. So that's why we'll talk about that. How many, just show of hands, how many have a board of directors or a board of elders or some kind of governing body that oversees their work? Okay, so that's most people. That's fantastic. If you don't, that's okay. But if you do, just a few tips and some encouragements. So board involvement is a key to effective fundraising. And as I talked about just with the CEO, the highest levels of the organization being involved in fundraising, that includes your board. And so if your board is already involved and is helping raise funds outside of the organization, is spreading the word, is giving themselves, is looking for others in their spheres of influence who might want to get involved in the organization, it will really help your fundraising. So those are a few things that are just absolutely critical. If you don't have those things, that doesn't mean you can't succeed, but your success will probably be slowed down by not having your board involved in that way. Most board members are volunteers. They're not getting paid to do what they do, and they make very effective advocates for your organization. I'm blessed with some fantastic board members at my organization who not only give themselves, but do a lot of the things that are mentioned up here, drawing their other people into the mission and our work and into giving. Some of them are just writing thank you notes to donors, and that's a great way to get your board involved, a very low pressure way to help them see how their involvement can change things. Another thing that our board chair does, and a few others on our board, but I'll just talk about what our board chair and his wife do. Every month or so, I give them the name of a couple, a donor couple, and I ask our board chair and his wife to have dinner with them. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now, and almost without exception, the giving of those couples who have dinner with our board chair and his wife usually more than doubles. And the reason that is because they feel valued by the organization, they feel heard by the organization, and the very highest level of the organization. They get to know him and his wife, and they learn to respect them for what they're doing and hear more about why they're involved. They get to share any concerns, and all those things I think add up to make them feel better about giving to my organization. So there are a lot of effective ways to involve board members. Like I said, it might be as simple as just writing a thank you note or making a call, having dinner with someone, but certainly it always helps to have them involved. Point number 3 here, another way to involve your board or whoever has oversight for your organization is in holding you all accountable. Ultimately, boards are responsible for the mission, for the work, for success in your organization. I need accountability. I guess my guess would be that you all need accountability too, and that having someone who's going to hold you accountable to do what you said you would do and to carry out the mission of the organization effectively is super helpful, and boards can provide that in a way that almost no one can. So that means a few things. When you're creating your fundraising goals, it means sharing those with your boards. It means sharing those with others who can hold you accountable to those goals. If they're involved in that process of setting the goals and holding you accountable, they also need to allocate needed resources. Time, we need time to do fundraising well, to be at meeting people, to craft emails, to craft communication pieces. And it's a board's responsibility to make sure that the organization has those resources in place. If you don't have a board, you still need to allocate the appropriate resources. So that's maybe a little bit more of your time than you're doing now. You probably need to look at your budget and say, do we have what we need in place to raise the kind of money that we want to raise for these special projects or for our ongoing needs or for our own salaries? So creating space and allocating those resources. I've mentioned a couple times already that fundraising, again, regardless of how big your organization is. I mentioned I have 8 full-time people, and one of his roles in fundraising, he had a team of 60 fundraising, and it's still really hard. And we need a lot of encouragement because sometimes it doesn't bear as much fruit as we hope it would. You all need encouragement too. And so whoever in your orbit, if you have a board, they need to be encouraging you. They need to be offering their prayers. They need to be asking how things are going and helping you find more energy and more motivation for the task, because it's really difficult. A culture of generosity. We talked at the beginning about advancement not being a department. It's everybody's job. One of the things that we need to help our organizations understand is that they can all contribute to the success of the advancement operation and our fundraising results. One of the ways we do that at my organization is we have a few days a year where we ask a lot of our other staff members to make thank you phone calls and to write thank you notes to people who have supported. Just like I mentioned with board members, we have our staff do that too so that they understand a little bit more about how the organization is funding it, how it's funded, who's funding it, and why that's important. So that's one way we engage our staff and try to create a culture of generosity. First, that understanding. We also ask our staff to give personally to the organization. We don't require that anyone does that, but we want to know that we hope that they would invest in our organization independent of their employment with our organization. We want them to be passionate about what we're doing, and we know that they are, and that's just one way that people can demonstrate their passion and, again, model that type of behavior. So that's going to look different from organization to organization, so I'm not going to prescribe for how you do that, but I will say that trying to engage your people in generosity, your other staff members, your colleagues in generosity can really help your fundraising efforts overall and creating that sense of team, even if you may be the only person in your organization who's responsible for fundraising or one of a couple. Outward engagement. When we are talking about fundraising, we're very often, we're mostly looking outside our organization for donors, for people in our community, for like-minded organizations. You'll meet a lot of people this week who are probably doing work that's similar to yours. We're reaching out to other churches. And as you do that, and as you do that intentionally and do that more, they become a little bit a part of your team. By building a good reputation for your organization and doing that intentionally over time, it will make your fundraising results better, or it likely will, because you have more people out there who know what you do, who can talk intelligently about what you do, who will talk favorably about what you do, and that makes it easier for you to raise money. So that's a way that by really intentionally looking out, you can add to your fundraising team without having other professional development people. So that's one thing to consider. Another that would go under outward engagement is seeking volunteers. I would encourage you at some point, maybe right now as I'm talking, or sometime this evening, to think of one person who you think might be a consistent help to you on a volunteer basis, who might be able to draw others into your organization, or who might be able to do a task for you that you're currently doing to free up some of your time so that you can do more fundraising. I think having volunteers, asking people to contribute in that way is really meaningful for them, and in my experience, it's been well worth the time that I've put into those volunteers, recruiting them and training them a little bit to do different tasks. That has really helped me expand our influence and expand our fundraising. I'll give you one example. A woman who's been donating to our organization for a number of years now. She is fantastic at involving her friends and colleagues and people she meets in her sphere. She's fantastic at getting the word out about Jill's House and making an ask to those people to get them involved in supporting Jill's House. She invites them to our events. She'll set up meetings between these people and me, and she's just wonderful. She does that out of the goodness of her heart because she cares about the mission and work of Jill's House and because she wants to see it succeed, and she wants to get others involved in helping us succeed. So she has been a fantastic, fantastic resource for me. And we've gotten some pretty big gifts and consistent supporters out of that. So you don't need a volunteer team of 10, but if you could right now or in the next sometime tonight, just think of one person who in the next month you might have a conversation with about how they could volunteer with you and help you in your fundraising efforts or help you in other ways so that you can do more fundraising to get beyond that 5-10% or however much time you're putting into it. Last thing I'll say is strong infrastructure. People who give to your organization do it because they care about you and because they care about the mission that God has called you to, about the service that you're providing, whatever that may be. One of the ways that we can enhance their joy and at the same time help them become consistent supporters over a long period of time is by thanking them well. People don't give primarily to be thanked or to get something out of it, but when you thank promptly after they give a gift, and by promptly I mean if you see a check come in or if you get gifts via PayPal or any number of other ways, take 2 minutes, call that person and say thank you. Say, I just saw that your gift came in and I just wanted you to know how grateful I am for your support and what that means. Or it might be an email, something like that. Some of our organizations have the capacity to do that on a mass scale with hundreds of gifts a week. If you're the only person, you probably aren't getting hundreds of gifts a week, so that makes it a little easier. But when you see those gifts come in, when they hit the bank account or when a check comes in the mail, reaching out quickly and just expressing your gratitude and letting them know what that is going to mean for your ministry is a great way of increasing their joy, which is a ministry to them, and also, I think, furthering support for your ministry. Gift receiving, I won't get into the legal aspects of this. In the United States, there are things that we're required to do in terms of recognizing people's gifts in a legal way. And so I don't, that could vary from country to country, and so we won't get into that too much, but it's that same idea that when someone gives a gift, the way we acknowledge and the way we respond to that says a lot about who we are and our gratitude, and it helps you deepen that relationship with them. So thanking promptly, thanking often. Don't let the time they give the gift be the only time you say thank you, but say thank you again and again and again throughout the year, and keep them up to date on how their gift is making an impact on the people God has called you to serve. Will expand your fundraising team in a big way.
I was sitting here listening to the ministries God has called you to, and I just want to tell you the thought that came to my mind, and that is there really are no small ministries because all of your ministries have a big God-sized vision. And I've had the privilege of leading small teams, fundraising teams in my career, and I've had the experience of leading large ones. And the truth is, the work is very much the same. Fundraising is as easy to describe as it is difficult to do well. You need to know what you're about, and you need to have a clear vision of what God has called you to do. If you don't, you'll start doing some other things and you'll dissipate what God originally called you to do. And then you have to tell that story really well to those that already know and love you. And then you need to expand that group of people that hear your story, that you think would be responsive to the ministry that you're doing. And then our strong conviction is, at the right time, in an appropriate way, you need to ask people to join you in your ministry. It might be, please help fund this project for us, or please come as a volunteer in this particular area. But you need to call people to work with you. A lot of people will stand along the sidelines unless they're called into something. And if they are, you will find some good long-term friends that can really help you do what you do. And then you kind of rinse and repeat. You do the same thing again. You deepen those relationships. You add other people. You serve them well. And the best way to serve those who give and volunteer for you is to do your work really, really well so they can see the results of what you've done. And there are other ways to do that, but that is the key way. Most of the people that support us financially and in other ways, as has already been said, don't do it for what they can get from it. Actually, in one sense they do, because what they get from it is the satisfaction of, I'm giving some of my resources, whether it's my time or my time and my treasure, I'm giving something to something that has eternal value. And that is usually satisfaction enough for most folks. I wanted to say a quick thing about your volunteer question. It was a great one. We are volunteers this week. And one of the reasons we're volunteers is we were asked to be. Would you come and do this? That's one reason. The second reason is they didn't say, just give us money and we'll take care of the rest. They said, God has gifted you in certain areas. Would you come and share that with us? And if you can make that connection with volunteers, you're going to find a lot of people that are going to get a lot of joy out of helping you. By word of introduction, I would just say, in God's providence, I have been in fundraising my whole career. I've served 3 different organizations over 30 years, and I've now, for the last 4 years, been consulting with organizations like yours full-time. So that's by way of introduction. I want to talk a little bit about getting the word out on your organization, because this is how you build partners in the work that you do. I hate to say the M word, marketing. I used to say when I was at Wheaton College, I was in charge of the only two dirty words on campus, fundraising and marketing. I got a little help on this by a marketing person who I really respect that I talked to many years ago. And she said, marketing is not self-promotion, but it's self-disclosure. Our job is to accurately tell God's people what it is God has called us to do and what are the results of the ministry that we're involved in. And here I think are the elements of telling our story well. It certainly has to be related to mission. Back to the first thing I said, the first word of success in development is clearly identifying what God has called you to do in a way that anybody who hears it will say, I get it, I get what you do. You need to tell stories. Volunteers, givers want to know how your mission is impacting individuals that you care about. And our occupational hazard is we say, well, we reached 1,000 kids this last year in some kind of ministry. A much more powerful way to tell that story is, let me tell you about one child that was at this event and how this transformed her life and how she impacted her family by the result of our ministry. Outcomes are more and more important. We found in America that kind of the era of you can have our money, you know better what to do with it than we do. There are more and more people that don't feel just like donors, but they feel like investors in your ministry. And they want to know what's the return on their investment. Not because they're greedy people, but because they want to be careful with their money. They've been careful with their money all their life. So what they're entrusting to you, they're hopeful that it will multiply what you can do in Christ's kingdom. So outcomes, we need to be prepared to give to people. And then we need to have future endeavors. We are consumed, and rightly so, with managing what we're doing right now. But I think givers, volunteers want to know what's on the horizon, what's next. A lot of the key givers that I've worked with over the years are constantly asking that question, what's next? When I was in college, I was in a linguistics class, And this chapter title stuck with me all these years, and the concept was that nothing never happens. And this really bears on how what we do needs other people to be a success. I would say it this way. There is nobody that touches your organization that's unchanged by that. They either, by their contact with what you're doing, have a higher view of what you do or a lower view of what you do. And what that means is the person that answers the phone in your office, the person that interacts with not only donors but those that you serve, says a whole lot more about the organization than you can. And if that team is working against you, unwittingly, of course, they wouldn't do it on purpose, but if they're working against you, they're making your job of fundraising much more difficult. So try to have a global view of the work that you're doing, including in fundraising. And how do you do that with a group? You tell stories. Let other people in the organization, we had a gift receiver in one of our offices, and every once in a while, she would come in and show me a crumpled $5 bill that was stuffed in an envelope with a little handwritten note. And we would share that with the whole team. And of course, we always celebrated the big gifts that came in, but this was an opportunity for her to know that this would bless the hearts of all those in our department if we were to know of that precious gift that came in. Nothing never happens. You've heard it said, organizational culture eats fundraising strategy for lunch. We can have all the best laid plans, but if our organization is not responsive to people, I worked with a university recently. I interviewed someone who was a graduate of 25 years, and she has started a business that is unbelievably successful. I mean, they have about $100 million in revenue. The first thing she said to me, she said, you know, I like my university okay, but they care a lot more about themselves than they care about their students. When I was a senior, I was having financial difficulty getting through my last semester, and I asked for an accommodation, and they said no. She's remembered that all of those years. Do you think that's affected the giving that she's done? Do you think she's told that story to anybody else but me? Probably so. Again, nothing never happens. So in your leadership position, whether you're leading one or two others or 10 others, you need to help them understand that they are as important to promoting the work of the ministry as those that are outward facing. Does that make sense? The best fundraising organizations make fundraising everybody's job. And cultivating a culture of generosity and modeling the behavior you hope to see. People look to us as leaders. Are we kind and loving to every one of our volunteers and our givers? Sometimes, we all know it, the big gift makes a bigger impact today than the little gift does. But how we treat that smaller giver says an awful lot about our ministry, and it says a lot about how the others should treat each one that they're working with.